You're so okay with losing in the moment for the greater good, but you don't understand that most people are only here for a moment. And they won't be here 25 years from today, whatever it is. And that's just a very interesting thing.
And the reason why is it's less relatable. It seems cold. It seems fairly arrogant to other people. And I understand why that is. But it's just my STEM part does is it takes in data, it draws conclusions with a % error. And it does think it's right most of the time. And usually it is compared to other people.
Next Level Nation, welcome back to another episode of Next Level University, where we teach you how to level up your life, your love, your health, and your wealth. We hope you enjoyed our latest episode. It was episode number 1369. Alan interviewed me about numbers and math and belief and goals and the compound effect. Who knew that would ever happen? Today, for episode number 1370, I'm going to interview Alan. Now, Alan, Mr. Lazaros.
Yes, sir.
There have been many seasons that we have shared together. And when I say shared, I don't mean we went through the same seasons at the same time, but we've had similar seasons. We've grown together, all of that happy jazz. All I mean by a season is usually there's some sort of motto, kind but truthful. That was one. Okay. There was one time, one season, in which you were, I would say, on a spiritual season.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a time during this spiritual season where you saw a flock of deer. And you had convinced yourself that because of your calm energy, you could approach the deer and be one with them. Is that true?
Is that true? Yes, that's true.
How did that go for you?
Well, so I'll provide the context here.
Please.
So there was this route that I would run, 2-mile run, and big into fitness at the time, trying to cut and trying to get in better shape, burn calories.
The deer.
And there's this.
Tell us about them.
The deer?
Yep.
Tell us about them. Okay, so there was this one 2-mile loop that I used to run around the house that I grew up in, and it was a beautiful run. And then there's this sand pit that I would stop at, and I would run up to the very top of this huge sand hill. Running in the sand, I always just wanted to make it harder. So running in the sand was like, good. Burns more calories, makes it more difficult, blah, blah, blah. I would listen to motivational videos and I would run. And there was this group of deer that would always be there. And they would run away at the beginning. And eventually I just said, what if I could be so centered? I could be so centered that they wouldn't feel threatened. And at the time, I was listening to a lot of Wayne Dyer. I was definitely going down the spiritual rabbit hole, for lack of better phrasing. The Untethered Soul was a book that I was reading. So now, in hindsight, this is what I now understand. And by the way, Kev, it was truthful but kind. Not kind, but truthful. But there's been many chapters, yeah. This was a very spiritual chapter for me. And ironically, I was pretty broke at the time. And that isn't to say that if you're spiritual, you're going to be broke. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that there's physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual development. And looking back, I now understand that the beginning of my life was a lot of STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. And I went so far down the STEM rabbit hole. Everything was achievement. Everything was reverse engineered. Everything was, calculated and logical and rational. And at 26 years old, I got in a car accident that got me to question my whole life. And by that point, I was extremely successful financially and corporate America. And after that, I, instead of achieve, STEM, science, technology, engineering, mathematics, I went all into personal development. That's when I decided focusing on developing me was the most important thing. And fast forward, I did a lot of emotional work and a lot of spiritual work. So physical, mental, emotional, spiritual. I did a lot of physical and mental in the beginning quarter of my life. But emotionally and spiritually, I was underdeveloped in hindsight. And so this chapter was very deep down the spiritual rabbit hole. I was really into it. And like everything, there's pros and cons. I was extremely centered. I was extremely fulfilled. I was extremely connected to myself, to the universe, to but I was also not really doing well in financial success. Or
I do recall.
Yeah, you do recall. Yep. And so, now I'm 34 now. That was in my late 20s. And I'm not sure if the deer would run away or not, but I do know that my vibration is much higher, for whatever you want to refer to that as. And my physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual development is much higher. And I'm swinging the pendulum back quite a bit these days, back to the science, technology, engineering, and mathematics version of me, which, if you're a long-term listener of this show, you are probably sensing.
What was your... Two questions. What phase are you in right now? Season. We'll say season just so we can keep it aligned. And what season taught you the most, and what was it? I swear I could do these for hours. I'm telling you, I could. These are like my favorite. These are my favorite. It brings back the old hyperconscious
days. Hyperconscious. The season I'm in now is the STEM season: science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. I want to make sure everyone knows what I mean by that. I'm in therapy. We talked about that on the last interview. Kevin interviewed me 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago. And what I found out is that I've actually exiled. There's something called internal family systems, and it's a therapy modality where you're kind of like a solar system, and you're the sun, and the planets. You have a bunch of parts of you. You have a part of you that's the science part, and you have the part of you that's the math part, and you have a part of you that's, the little kid still. And we all have all these parts, and we show certain people certain parts, and that's why everyone thinks whenever you're a public figure and you go on a podcast, like, that's not the real him. It's like, no, it is. It's just a part that he doesn't normally show you, or she doesn't normally show you. Like, and if you've ever been in an intimate relationship with your partner around their family, it's like, who is that, right? It's just interesting. So they're in the little kid part when they're around their parents, most likely. So anyways, what I found out in therapy is that I've really exiled my STEM part, my science, technology, engineering, and mathematics part, which I do believe to be my own unique genius zone. I think everyone has a genius zone. So Kev, you're good at titling things. Rap comes pretty easy to you. There's certain things that you're just really good at. I would also argue that bodybuilding came very easy to you in hindsight. There's a lot athletics in general, right? That kind of thing. Hand-eye coordination, probably pretty easy. There's probably a lot of different things.
Blind in one eye, so I don't know about that one.
But it's still somehow you managed to be an all-star baseball player with blind in one eye. So
there's layers. Yeah, there's layers.
In that. Yeah, kinesiology. But anyways, so I'm just saying random big words. The study of the movement of the human body, kinesiology.
Supercalifragilisticexpialidocious.
Exactly.
I believe it was.
So the season I'm in right now is the STEM season, which is essentially, now that I've identified that so when I'm behind the scenes and I'm alone, and hopefully all the listeners are thinking about them behind the scenes alone, what's the part that drives? For me, when I'm alone, it's the science, technology, engineering, math. I mean, it just always is going. When I'm with other people, I'm reluctant to share that part of me. And the reason why is it's less relatable. It seems cold. It seems fairly arrogant to other people, and I understand why that is. But it's just my STEM part does is it takes in data, it draws conclusions with a % error, and it does think it's right most of the time, and usually it is compared to other people. Which, again, sounds arrogant, which is why I usually exile it. So anyways, that's the season I'm in now, is learning how to share that part of me with more people to help them. That's why I love coaching. Okay, second part of the question. Which season did I learn the most?
Yeah. Most valuable season. Retrospectively.
Post-car accident. No, it's not. Wow. Before I met Emilia, it was post-car accident. So, for the new listeners, father passed away when I was 2. He was 28 when he passed away. I was 26 at the time of my car accident. So 2 years old at the time of his car accident. And so I'm 26. I get in a really bad car accident. We're very lucky to be alive, my cousin and I, genuinely. The car was totaled. And after that, I questioned everything. And before this interview, I would have said that. The 6 months after that was just like, you want to talk about growth spurt, physical, mental, emotional, spiritual. I went down the rabbit hole. Every book I could get my hands on, I was just downloading into my consciousness, downloading. Still am, but not to that same drastic extent. The next huge growth season for me was when I met Emilia. When I met Emilia, and as corny as it might sound, it's the soul's recognition of your counterpoint in another. It's a quote that I always loved. It's from a movie called Wedding Crashers.
I wish it wasn't from that movie.
Yeah, same, because it's so good, right? The soul's recognition of its counterpoint in another. That is exactly how it feels with Emilia. And when I first met her, I said this, and I didn't know how profound it was at the time. But I basically said, I'm going to teach you the external world. You're going to teach me the internal one. And I don't know where that came from. I mean, maybe that was my spiritual side, intuition or whatever. But I said it, and it's very true. I mean, I'm teaching her science, technology, engineering, and mathematics constantly. And she's teaching me about the inner world constantly. I mean, half the books, we're reading a book tonight called The Body Keeps the Score. And we're going to eat food and listen to this book together. And she loves that stuff. I'm going to be honest. I'm not that naturally drawn to that stuff. I don't really care. I don't want to read that. I'd rather read Peak Performance or Atomic Habits or The Compound Effect, or that's the stuff I'm naturally drawn to. But what I want and what I need are two different things. If you want a coach, you probably need a therapist. If you want a therapist, you probably need a coach. And that's just, I've never seen an exception to that rule, despite what most people would probably want to think, myself included. But anyways, so that was the most powerful season for me, is when I finally was with my soulmate. It unlocked everything. It unlocked, I mean, it still is, right? But it unlocked more than I'd ever been unlocked before. And Emilia has a client that said she's like the fairy godmother, and what she really means is, I don't know how she's doing it, but she's unlocking me. And that was the most powerful season, is when I first started to believe in my ability to have a peak performance partner for life. That's like an intimate partner. Because you were always my peak performance partner for like the 6 years prior, and you always will be. But she's my intimate partner, and that's a whole nother level for me. It's like unbelievable. I'm still learning the compound effect of that. That's blowing my mind.
What do you think the next season will be? If you had to just guess, intuitively, what do you think the next season for you is?
It's funny, when you asked that, I actually got scared of my answer, because it's leaning back into science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, showing the world who I really am more than I ever have, and honestly, becoming really successful again. That's where we're headed intuitively. But it's all predicated on me vulnerably expressing to the world who I really am. And then that will bring more opportunities and more results, and those results will then make people feel like I'm less full of it. So it's that whatever that snowball is, I'm excited, but I would say I'm nervous, just because traditionally speaking, I'll go quick on this, but my therapist and I were talking about, like, when did you exile your science, technology, engineering, and math part? And I think it was when I was 17 or 16. I proved a textbook wrong, and the whole class laughed at me, and the teacher laughed at me, and I've told that story on the podcast before, but basically that's when I decided unconsciously that my genius is not likable or lovable or not welcome here. And I remember I had a friend, her name was Tara, one of my favorite people in the whole world, and she got frustrated, but in a loving way. And she was actually one of the people who I cared about deeply. Two people in particular that were really mad at me that day. And I never knew this before until I went to therapy. So if you never got a therapist, do it, because it's like mind-blowing. But Tara and Kiki were my two best friends, and I cared about them so much. And they were very mean to me that day. And they love me, and I know that, and they weren't trying to be mean, but they were very mean. And I don't think they know how much that hurt me. Mm. And they were both wrong. I was right. The textbook was wrong. And I think after that, I just decided, you know what? Being smarter than other people isn't valuable or isn't okay. Mm. And what's ironic is that me being smarter is going to help everyone. But it never felt good.
I appreciate you sharing.
Of course.
I knew we were going to go deep. I knew. And this all started with a couple deer. Just a flock of deer amongst friends. You know what I mean? You mentioned in that, you said, I don't remember the exact phrasing because I got lost in the story, but it was something along the lines of who I really am. People are going to see who I really am. Who are you really? I get asked this on podcasts all the time, so it's interesting to be able to flip it.
Yeah. Well, the first answer is I'm a lot of different parts that, so there's like a little kid part of me that loves movies, and there's a little kid part of me that loves food and is super playful. And then there's like a really hardcore version of me that I call Achilles, which is like, just like my gym, like when I'm in the gym, like really hardworking. That's what I like, will run through a brick wall if they have to. And then there's like another part of me that's extremely, it wants to like help everybody. Like it wants to help everybody. And what happens is that part tries to help everybody, and then Achilles will come in and get mad because it's fruitless a lot of the time. There's a book by Lucius Seneca called On the Shortness of Life, and it talks about the 8 things to watch out for. And it's just a Roman philosopher, but it's a very powerful book. And the one that is my kryptonite is what he calls self-imposed servitude to thankless people. In other words, trying to help people become more successful that don't really appreciate you. And they don't appreciate your value and what you've taught them. And maybe they will one day, I don't know. But as far as putting time and effort into helping someone who doesn't ultimately end up appreciating you, I would say that that's been a kryptonite for me in my life. So anyways, who am I is the original question. The part that I am most, and this is what I think is kind of hard for me to share, is the STEM part. Definitely. That's the part that's driving beneath the surface that no one knows. Not no one knows, but they kind of intuitively know. Like, listeners, what's the difference between Kevin and I? Everything I say is calculated. Everything I do is calculated. Everything I don't do is calculated. We all know it. We just don't really consciously know it. And I'm just a lot less relatable. So I have one client, his name's Udit. He came to Next Level Live. Udit, what's up, man? He's an engineering mind. When I coached him, I could tell it was different. And this is nothing against anyone who's not an engineer, but I'm telling you, from an engineer to an engineer, it's a different game. He just knows. He knows math, he knows physics, he knows chemistry, he knows biology, he knows physiology, he knows neuroscience, and he knows very little psychology, unfortunately, which is why I had to focus on the psychology part with him. And he, Udit, with all the love, you got to work on communication. All good. My point is I can tell when I'm talking to an engineer. I have one mentor who owns a bunch of companies and board of directors and all kinds of stuff. He's like, I only hire engineers. And I know why. I do. It's like a different world when you know math and science really well. It's very hard to coexist with people who don't.
Next Level University and Kevin is exactly where you need to be if you're a podcaster. When I first started out just a few months ago, I had no clue on the direction I was going. I was getting hustled by another company that was giving me not even close to the value that Kevin and Next Level U was giving me. They literally changed the trajectory of my podcast, have helped me out tremendously. They understand the clients. I promise you, you will not go wrong with dealing with Kevin and Next Level U. I'll see you there.
And Emilia and I were in the gym last night, and we were driving home, and she said, Alan, it's fascinating because of all the science, technology, engineering, and mathematical people that I've met, because she works in IT for a $1 billion pharmaceutical company. They really struggle to communicate with other people, and I said, I know, I get it. I understand. Like, it's hard for me too. She's like, yeah, but you're like amazing compared to them. It's like amazing to find out what you know, because we've been whiteboarding a lot, and I'm bright. I'm very smart. And even that, saying that out loud is hard. Okay. But I do know it's true. And I do inside myself when I'm alone, it's like, yeah, of course. Like, it's like, that's who I really am. So to answer your question, dance around it 1,000 times. I'm a very, very strong scientist, a very, very strong technologist, a very, very strong engineer, and a very, very strong mathematician. And I say that last one with oomph because that's really the root of it. I had a lot of other people that were better at tech in school and stuff. No one is almost ever better at math. And when I find someone better at math, it's like, whoa. But even in school, I'll be brief about this, but I was around a bunch of geniuses. Seriously, academic geniuses, I'll call them. They were better at some of the engineering stuff and computer science. None of them were better at math. Except for, I don't think anyone, actually. Which is wild to say out loud, by the way. I mean, they did better on the tests, but I was also partying all night. So anyways, and even some of them said, wow, you're like really good at math. And it's like, you're like smarter than me. Why are you saying that? And now in hindsight at 34, it's like, oh, I'm way better than you at this. In hindsight. At the time, it didn't make sense because I considered them smarter than me. When in reality, they studied 10 times harder. And Tara used to say, it pisses me off. You can do 1/10 of the work and get 10 times the result. It's like, I went and studied for a whole week. I teach it to you in 10 minutes and you ace the test. You get a better grade than me. And that was not every time. Tara was very brilliant, but it has come easy to me always, definitely.
What do you see? This is something that you will always be able to make land better than I, just because this isn't my experience. What do you say to somebody who has exiled something so positive yet potentially treated negatively? Like, how do they get in touch with that?
Okay. The reason you've exiled, so there's two, from all the people I've coached and studied, I think that there's two main things. I think you're either really afraid of success or you're really afraid of failure. If you're really afraid of success, you're most likely unbelievably good in a certain area and competent in a certain area that makes other people really insecure, and your deepest pain comes from relationships. So my deepest pain doesn't come from not being capable. My deepest pain comes from relationships. So I'm someone who is more afraid of success than of failure. If you're on the other side of that coin, you are someone who's afraid of failure because you don't feel capable. So your deepest pain was not being smart enough or not being good enough or being picked last or whatever because of your capabilities. So I think everyone decides when they're young unconsciously whether or not they're great or not. And if they do decide that they're great, usually they struggle to relate to people. And usually they struggle in relationships. Okay? But usually they're very successful in their careers. And usually they exile the part that really is great because it makes everyone else insecure. Like, sitting here and saying I'm so smart is not relatable, and it's definitely not something that's endearing. Like, I understand that, right? Me crying about it was endearing. Me saying the truth that I'm smarter than everyone else is not endearing. It's actually the opposite. And I'm not smarter than everyone else, but you know what I'm saying. So if you're out there and you've exiled the best part of you, it's because you're insecure about other people's insecurities. It's because you had a sibling that was jealous and lashed out every time you were awesome. There's a lot of people like that. There's a lot of people out there that are so great, but until they're around someone who's greater than them, they don't let it out because they're scared to. And I can't really empathize as much with the other side of the coin, except for when it comes to fitness. In fitness, I was never natural. So athletics never really came super naturally to me. I was a good basketball player, and everything comes fairly easy to me within reason because I think of because of my reverse engineering brain and how I can hone things. But when it comes to like strength or physique or being big and strong, that was never natural for me. Whereas when there was these other athletes that could dunk a basketball when they were 15 and they hit puberty and looked like real men, I remember being super insecure. I remember being very not feeling good about me. Mm. But when it came to intelligence and academics and the ability to achieve financial success or whatever, that never felt like I don't have any pain there really. Where I do have a lot of pain is when I was better than other people at stuff and they would lash out at me, or they would get insecure and bully me, and this is like a real thing. And some of the listeners will be like, holy crap, definitely. And so if you're truly beautiful, if you're gorgeous, seriously, you know what this feels like. If you're a gorgeous man or a gorgeous woman, people unconsciously don't like you and you know it. You can tell. It's like, this won't land if you're not as attractive. But I used to say that it's the most beautiful woman in the bar that's actually the most lonely. And I'm telling you that that's a thing. If you talk to these people, you will realize that they get very hurt. Men try to like convince them that their value's low because that's the only way they can get them. It's a whole thing. Mm. And so anyways, before I go down the rabbit hole any further, you're either afraid of success or you're afraid of failure. You have to identify which. Your deepest pain either comes from relationships or from not being good enough at stuff. Like it's either you're not very capable or you're not easily likable. One of those two. Okay? And if you can identify which is which, you have to work on overcoming that. And when you do, oh my goodness. I mean, for me, it was the relationships. I had to work on, and I still have to work on being my true self around other people. I can do it behind the scenes all day. I'll design PPT for everybody. Like, everyone, here you go. Just don't connect it to me, right? It's not hard to deploy an app, AI, to help you with your habits. But when I'm talking about my habits in front of the class, and people see that I'm like really, really, really competent, that's scary. Mm. I'm much more scared of being better than of being worse than. I almost seek worse than because then I can get better.
Well, it's very interesting because I was thinking of this recently. You're so okay with losing. Here, okay, this was my takeaway. You're so okay with losing in the moment for the greater good. But you don't understand that most people are only here for a moment. And they won't be here 25 years from today, whatever it is. And that's just a very interesting thing where I'm always thinking like, I know these people probably aren't going to be here forever. I want to make sure I'm winning while they're here. You and I are just very different when it comes to that.
And what's ironic is both of those understandings are important to understand simultaneously.
Yeah.
Yeah. And your fear is failure. Definitely. My fear is success. So hopefully all the listeners have one of those. So whichever one you have more, reach out if you need help.
I can't claim to know the fear of success very well. So that's why I was intrigued to ask that, because I think that's something you just have a deeper understanding of because you have more experience. Lightning round. 1 minute. We did for episode number 100, I believe, somehow I got shafted and we chose your one word, which was legacy. I think we did that for episode 100. How has your perspective, definition, desire of legacy changed over the last 1,270 episodes since then?
I don't think it's changed at all. I witnessed the impact. Okay, so I'll share this. This is actually going to be really hard to share. My Uncle Joe just passed away this past weekend. And that was my dad's brother. And I don't know if he ever fully got over my father's passing. Mm. And he had an alcohol challenge and all kinds of stuff. But when you grow up in a family that had a person who had such a big impact. And that's one thing that is very clear. I mean, my dad, John, passed away when he was 28, but he had a huge impact on people, like huge. And I always locked in on that. I always knew, like, everyone talks about John. My mom used to say, everyone only buys from John. He was like such a bright light, and he was flawed, of course, as all of us are, but he was a bright light. I'm telling you, you can tell. Like, everyone still talks about him. Everyone tells stories about him. It was such a big impact. And so when somehow I locked in on that as a kid, and I just unconsciously or subconsciously decided that I wanted to have a big impact because I could see how much of a difference that could be. And when I got in my car accident, I realized that I was not maximizing that. And I was living outside of my calling, which is to have the biggest impact I can possibly have. You know, I knew that I was squandering my gifts. Yeah, I was still successful, but not nearly as successful as I could be or should be. I mean, there is no nobility in putting in 1/10 the effort and getting 10 times the result. There isn't. And on the last episode, we talked about 2 episodes ago, we talked about the guy in Panera who is not blessed with the gifts that I have. And I don't know if the term is special needs or mentally challenged, but he is maximizing more than most people. And to me, that is what matters. How much are you maximizing your potential, and how much are you contributing beyond yourself? And I think that that's what legacy is. And it hasn't changed much. It's the most important thing in the entire world, I think. At least it's certainly the most important thing to me.
Somebody asked me the other day, and I was like, Alan's definition, based on experience, obviously, partially, is drastically different. I was like, for me, it's super short term. Like, however, my legacy to you is how you feel after I leave this interview, because you may never hear from me again. Like, that's right. My focus. Right. It's just very interesting. That's why I asked that.
Well, it's cool that we both still want to have that impact.
We're the opposite, but the same. Anything in
That's a fact.
Anything in closing you'd like to say before we go?
Think of a teacher. Think of a mentor. Think of a friend. Think of a parent. Think of someone who, through their example, you wanted to be better. Think of someone who through who they are made you want to be better. And then think about what your life might have been without that. And then go be that for someone else. Because there's a lot of really unfulfilled, unhappy people.
It's interesting you wrap up with that, because I don't know if I was going to ask a question, I don't know if it was going to be a statement, but I think you and I, one of the reasons we're so all in doing what we're doing is because we're trying to be the people that we needed. You know, somebody asked me that the other day, and I was like, I just want to be a good dude. I just want to inspire people. I just want to be a good person. Like, when you're around me, you feel good. You know, maybe you do good, or you feel better. Maybe you do better. So I obviously aspire with that very much, my friend.
Of course, brother. That's the only way this has been able to become what it is. And yeah, that's like little kids and stuff. They need that so much, you know? They need that so much. So
I do.
You know, you help someone, You inspire someone, they have a bigger dream, and then they, in pursuit of their dream, grow, and then they inspire someone, and it really is how we change the world.
Well, we talked about the numbers of it when you interviewed me. It's like, think of it. If you help one person who helps one person, who helps two people who help two people, it's like you'll have your own unique impact on the world.
Yeah, it spreads.
It does.
It spreads. You really can change the world. I always say, jokingly and also true, we're going to change the world. And Emilia always says, you already are. And it's true. And I'm like, yeah, but like,
but really though.
But like, yeah, but really though, and that's the duality of it, right? Is you are changing, my teacher, Mrs. Pryor, she changed my world, which could have changed the world, who knows? So, that.
Wonderful. Next Level Nation, if you have been thinking about group coaching and now feels like the right time, obviously you're getting to know us at a deeper level with these kind of interview episodes, which I'm enjoying very much, clearly. We have our 11th round of group coaching starting on July 11th, 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Again, accountability is always helpful. Learning more is always impactful. Meeting other people who are on a similar journey is something you can't really replicate. You're going to get all of those in group coaching, and it is less than $97 if you use the 30% discount code that we will give you. Reach out, Alan at nextleveluniverse.com, Kevin at nextleveluniverse.com.
Our next monthly meetup is July 6th, 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. 3 things everyone should know about their intimate partner. If you do not know a lot about your intimate partner, they probably don't feel seen, heard, understood, which is not good. Niche geet. So join us. You will definitely learn something, and your intimate relationship will be better for it.
Tomorrow, for episode number 1371, it's almost impossible to succeed with the wrong people. Success is hard enough, never mind doing it with somebody who doesn't want to see you win strapped to your back. So we will be talking about that tomorrow. As always, we love you, appreciate you, grateful for each and every one of you. And at NLU, we do not have fans, we have family. We will talk to you all tomorrow.
Keep inspiring. Next Level Nation.